For everybody out here, believe me, I'm a business owner too, and you got family, you got obligations. There's nothing more important. Your family has to be first. That's why I kept constantly thinking, build a team, build a team, build a team. It's good to delegate responsibility, but not delegate control. So maintain control over your finances and just delegate the responsibility.
Be the change you want to see. Make a difference by giving your money a purpose, a mission to do good. Welcome to Money with Mission, where we show you how to create passive income so that you have options for how to work and how to live your life while leaving a legacy of positive social impact.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Money with Mission. Today I have Gary Wilson. Gary's going to talk to those of you who think you might want to do this real estate investing thing on your own and not invest in passive things. So we want to cover everything for you out there. So we have Gary Wilson. Welcome, Gary.
Hi, Felicia. Thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to share,
This is fun. Just full transparency. I was on Gary's podcast, Massive Passive Cashflow, a few weeks ago. So make sure you go check out his podcast, Massive Passive Cashflow. And we're going to talk about some things here. You can get way more information there. Make sure you subscribe, do all those things to help us really grow our shows. All right. Gary, again, thank you for coming on. Talk to us about how you got to be where you are today in your business and what you're doing with you've got a lot going on.
Yeah. Well, really, I think a lot of people can say this in life. You work and work and work and swing the bat and swing the bat. And every now and then you get a lucky break. So I had a lucky break in college. My college freshman year roommate was a guy named Socrates. And Soc and I are still great friends today. He's in Port St. Lucie, Florida. Well, his dad was a Greek immigrant. His mother was born in the US, but also 100% Greek. And his parents met in Greece. Her parents sent her there for a high school graduation for the summer to reunite with the family, learn the culture. Well, she came home married, Mr. Demet. In any case, the guy didn't speak a lick of English, put himself through MIT, believe it or not, to engineering, and ended up moving to Richmond, Virginia and started investing. So by the time Shock and I were freshmen, he already had a portfolio. 4 years later, we go to graduate and we're going to just, rent a place for the beach, live the life, two bachelors, making a lot of money. And his dad said, no, you're not. He said, don't act like a bunch of idiots. He said, you're going to buy a house and I'm going to help you do it. And he never gave us the money. He never gave us the fish. He taught us how to fish. This was January 1986. And anybody that's been around long enough remembers there was a major piece of legislation called the Tax Reform Act of 1986.
Yeah.
That removed a lot of loopholes for actually people like doctors, in fact. So it created an opportunity for guys like us. So we bought our first house in Virginia Beach, Virginia, 4-bedroom, 2-bath ranch. We rented out the other 2 bedrooms and those 2 guys pretty much paid our mortgage, but it was creative right out of the gate. We didn't do a typical, we assumed his first mortgage. He had a second that we refinanced with our own second, and the remaining equity, we gave him a note for the remaining equity, which is a third. We have 3 mortgages and we still ended up, the rent from the other 2 bedrooms pretty much paid the bills. But that's really how we got started. I'll never forget. Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to back up because you just said a whole bunch of stuff that I know maybe a lot of people didn't understand. Yeah. I'm going to ask a question and then come back to that. But when you were doing that, did you realize how big of a deal that was, or was just what we're doing because this is how Socrates' dad told us to do it?
Sock probably did because his dad he grew up in that family. I didn't. I was completely naive. I just was basically saying yes, sir, no, sir.
Mm-hmm.
I think I knew instinctively this was a lucky break. I didn't realize how big it was till much later in life,
Yeah. Okay. So 1986, the term house hacking was not invented yet, but that's what you were doing. And you did not, tell me how it was a very, like you said, creative deal.
Yes.
You assumed part of the mortgage, which means the person who owned the house that you were buying the house from had a mortgage and you just took that over, correct?
Correct. Now, back then, guys, this is important. It was a VA mortgage and we were able to assume it without qualifying. It was simply a piece of paper,
Wow.
Nowadays, if you're not in the military or you're not a veteran, you can assume a VA mortgage, but you have to qualify. That's the difference. And I believe if you are military, you could assume non-qualified, but then the person who took out the original mortgage, they're not relieved of liability if you do it that way. They don't get to get their eligibility back to buy other properties and so forth. A little more complex than that. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So you assumed a mortgage.
mm,
You had 3 mortgages. Tell me those 3 again. Just
correct.
the
So
assumption.
the owner had a second mortgage already, and that had to be paid off. So we took out our own second mortgage to pay off his second mortgage. This was all done at the closing table, like simultaneously. And then there was still equity that he had in the house. So he gave us a third mortgage and we give him a note for the third mortgage. That's the little banking knowledge there. In a mortgage situation, the borrower gives the lender the note, the lender gives the borrower the mortgage, right? So the mortgage ties the note to the property. But so essentially, we took out a third note, a third mortgage, owner financing. The owner was the banker
Yeah.
on the third note, and we
Yeah.
paid him off a few years later. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that was 1986, and that was a lot. So we still got a lot to talk
Oh,
through here,
yeah.
you guys. And don't think that so don't tune out, first of all, because thinking, "Oh, he's talking about 1986." You can't do that today.
Mhm.
I'd be willing to bet there are places that you can do that today, but we'll get to that a little bit later.
Yes, you
Okay,
can.
so
Well, yeah.
that was your beginning. That's why you first got into real estate investing. You and your friend Socrates, you had a mentor in his father to help
Mm,
you do that. And then once you really started wrapping your mind around what you had done, what happened?
yep. Well, it all started after the closing. We had gone down to Nags North Carolina, which is people refer to as the Outer Banks, to celebrate. We're on the deck of one of Sock's beach houses, and he's pounding his chest, and he's literally like, I mean, spit's coming out. He's saying, "If you boys do what I tell you to do, you won't have to work for anybody else when you're 35 years old." And we were just bright-eyed, bushy-tailed kids, and we just wanted to go have fun. So, anyways, I got married and started having children, and Sock bought me out. So because
Okay.
I was married, he wasn't, that kind of thing. And he's 10 years later, I'm waking up, it's working. I just didn't tell you who I worked for. It's PNC Bank, major bank in
Okay.
Pennsylvania, away from the beach, away from my friends, and really not liking the business at all. I was not going to be sitting on a desk in a corporate office. And I told myself, I said, I'm going to do what Sock's dad told me, and I'm going to start investing. And I did. And I went out that next year and I acquired 10 properties, total of 30 units. Some were fourplexes, some were two duplexes, some were threeplexes.
Uh-huh.
Within 1 year, I just put my head down. I borrowed against the equity in my house. I borrowed against my 401k. I had cash. I had cash I used. I took out a personal line of credit, which is just essentially called a signature loan. And
Hmm.
all that allowed me to get the down payments. And I financed the rest through traditional bank loans, traditional mortgages. In that first year, Felicia, at the end of the year, I had enough. The money I was making on my cash flow from the properties actually equaled the cash flow I brought home for and I was a corporate VP. I was not doing too shabbily. And I
Yeah.
thought, I now have options in life. I got choices, and I was so much more relaxed as a result, you know? So those
That's
properties are bought more traditionally, right? Putting
yeah.
money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing that was not traditional or not air quotes normal or common is number one, you realized you didn't like what you were doing
Yep.
and you decided to make a difference and you remembered the thing that you had done with Socrates and realized, hey, that was a thing. How that made you feel and all those things. You're like, okay, I'm going to do that. And
Yes.
then there's many of us that get to that point and then say, but I don't have the money for that, and
Mhm.
then stop. So then you got into okay, how do I have the money for that? Well, I have my cash saved up. There it is. I have equity in my house. I can pull that out. I have a 401k that I can borrow against. All these different creative ways to have the cash to do the thing you want to do. So many of us get so stuck in, we look at our bank account and see the numbers that are there. It's like, that's not going to get me very far without looking at every other asset that you have that can be used to get liquefied a little bit so you can have the cash to do what you want to do. That was huge. That was really
Yeah.
huge.
That was the beginning of the end of my corporate life. It was that 1 year. I will tell you guys, it was a little bit scary, but because I had that one property under my belt with the guidance of Sock's dad, I had some confidence to go out there and, to me, take the risk of borrowing for the down payments. Because I didn't
Yeah.
have enough cash for all 10 of them, but
Yeah.
it's two payments, two properties exhausted with cash. The rest are all borrowed, but I had the confidence that I knew the cash flow would be more than enough to pay the debt. And I worked my what off that first year. But I will tell you another thing is the second year, I didn't buy anything. I was disciplined and I purposely took all the cash flow, didn't take a dime for myself and paid off all the secondary debt. So now I had 10 properties already built in equity. Cause remember made down payments, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I paid off all the secondary debt. So I had less debt and more equity. And then what I started doing, Felicia, is I thought I'm going to actually do this strategically. So I would take the cash flow and start knocking down the debt on one property, not all 10 of them, just one. And I mean, rapidly paying this thing down that I could borrow against that. Right. And then go get the next property. And that started this chain reaction of sort of, I think of it like climbing the steps in a staircase. Right. Although it was more horizontal at first, it was like a curve that was sort of flat at first, but I gradually started turning the corner and the curve started pointing upward where it became vertical after about another 3 years. And at that point, I was completely independent. I mean, it was discipline like we talked about before, and you have to be the master of delayed gratification. If any of you have been to medical school or dental school, you know what I'm talking about, you know?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I'm going to go back. When did you quit your PNC job?
Yep. About 5 years after I started investing, I was 40 years old, and that's when I left. It was August 13th, 2003. And I walked in one day and told my boss, I said, look, I'm not quitting. I just want you to know I'm going to be leaving. I don't have to work here anymore. And here's why. And the funny thing is he was actually happy for me. He said, you know what, Gary? One of my best friends did that. He now lives out in a chalet in Colorado, living the high life. And he said, you're the second person I met. And he said, I'm jealous. I mean, you bought your own freedom. And he hit the nail on the head. I can't describe that feeling, Felicia, of what that felt like. I literally walked out of there. Here's the comical part. So I'm Mr. Frugal, right? So I go in there with a dolly to get my personal belongings on my last day. It's
Uh-huh.
all, so it's hot as you know what. And I'm walking out there, get to the street where it's a maze called Grand Avenue. It's a pretty busy street. And several months before was a major layoff, right? So I'm here with a dolly with boxes and my tie loose. I'm sweating. My shirt's halfway undone. And there's these guys in suits looking at me and said, hey, we just want to tell you, man, we're so sorry. Can we help you take your stuff? We'll, do you need another job? And I looked at him and I said, man, I just retired.
I just
You know,
quit.
you know, it
I
hit me.
just
I was like,
quit.
oh my gosh. I wish I could can that feeling and give it to people so they could see what it feels like and feel what it feels like.
Uh, that's amazing. I'm going to go back a little bit further because you
Sure.
worked for 5 years doing two jobs. Is that correct? Your
Oh, yeah.
PNC day
Yeah.
job and your real estate investing.
Oh, yeah.
How, and you had a family.
Yes.
How did that all work? And there's so much into that because our brains, a lot of people's brains will say, "There's no way I can do that because then I don't spend time with my family." And you do give up some things, and
Yeah.
you'll talk about that a little bit. But it just seems like a lot going on in 5 years.
Yeah. Well, one of the key things is learning that I not only can't but I should not do everything myself. So once I started buying the properties, the first two properties, actually, I realized like, man, I need to get some real help here. Like I'm okay on the phone in the evenings and things like that on Saturdays, but I did not want to be out working every weekend. I want to be home with my kids.
Hmm.
So one of my tenants, just purely accidental. I mean, this is a great story in itself. Her name was Brianna, and I had to show. I would use Saturday mornings to show vacancies, like once a month or something. This
Okay.
one Saturday, I got caught at a scheduling conundrum. So I called Brianna. I said, Brianna, I hate to ask you this, but I have a unit 2 doors down. I need to be there an hour. There's no way I can make it. If I tell you where the key is, would you mind just opening the door and letting the people in to take a look around? She said, sure. Well, not only did she let him in, she took a copy of her application that she had for me, had them fill it out. And when I called her later, she said, Gary, I'm going to fax this over to you. Those people are wonderful. I already checked them out. I think they're going to be great tenants. I'm like, what? So I said, man, you are hired, sister.
I said,
That was my first strategic move. And then she knew a clean out company that did clean outs. So that became my second way of delegating and giving away responsibility. And eventually I had, plumber, electrician. It wasn't all at once. It was like a process that took time. But that really allowed me to be the coach up in the booth,
yeah,
watching everything, directing everything on the field. And that is a critical
yeah.
for everybody out here. Believe me, I'm a business owner too. And you got family, you got obligations. There's nothing more important. Your family has to be first. And I will admit, there were times I was away taking care of something when I should have been in my home because my neighbor was having a birthday party for their kid and I
Yeah.
wasn't there.
Yeah.
That stuff that really gnawed away at me. And that's why I kept constantly thinking, build a team, build a team, build a team. And after about another 2 to 3 years, I really did have a solid team. It was just basically being a traffic cop, controlling
Yep.
the game from the booth. More details of that, of course, but that's essentially what I did, Felicia, to be able to have a balanced life.
Perfect. That
Yep.
was great. Now I'm going back to where you were talking about you bought the I can't remember how many you had there at the end of that 5 years, but how
Yep.
you were able to buy down the equity and do the vertical growth thing because I think a lot of people might have missed that. So let's talk through that one more time.
Yeah, really, really important. So one of the things I did to acquire properties to get value was I bought properties that were undervalued, typically because they had deferred maintenance. They needed carpeting, they needed painting, they needed windows, roofs, kitchens, or you name it. It's just all over the map. But I bought them at a discount price because I knew I could remodel them to not only get them to where their market value, but have built-in equity. In other words, the cost of me remodeling was less than the increased value. So
Okay.
you buy what's called a Burr method: buy, remodel, rent, refinance. So I got to the point I could pay cash for them, right? Remember that process I used allowed me to pay cash. And then I would, do all the remodeling, rent it out, have a brand new lease on the property, go to the bank, and they would give me, essentially they would loan me 80% loan to value. But remember this ratio, everyone. I never wanted to owe more than 2/3 of what I owned. So if I had a $100,000 property, I didn't want to borrow more than 66,000, right? Even though I
Okay.
might have had more equity there, I didn't want to leverage myself to the hilt because I quote unquote because I could. As one of the biggest things I've seen people do is don't borrow the max if you don't need to. Only borrow what you need. You can always come back later and borrow more. Okay. But the way I was able to do that, what led to that was I would take my excess cash flow in the early years. Remember, I never paid myself a dime. And I would pay down instead of paying down all of them at the same time, I would pay down one of them. So the pay down was a lot more rapid, a lot more aggressive. So I had more equity in the property. Then I would go to a bank and get a brand new fresh mortgage on that. But I didn't get a fixed mortgage. I got a line of credit. The line of credit, it's like a home equity line of credit is what it was.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
happened to be in first position because I paid
Mhm.
off the original debt. So I had a first position loan, line of credit with a low interest rate, allow me to go out and either just put a down payment on the next property or buy it completely, right? And then when I would do the same thing with that property, I would pay back the line of credit and go and do the same thing again. Well, as you might imagine, over a period of 2 to 3 years, I had now like multiple properties that I could borrow against. And this is something I want everybody to remember. And you're going to say this to people and they're going to tell you you're nuts, but you can do it. I actually got a line of credit against the equity in my whole portfolio. Now, I
Mhm.
know that number one sounds risky, but remember it was a line of credit. So it was incumbent upon me to be responsible for that line of credit and not just go out and buy boats and cars and go on vacations, but to buy income producing assets, and i.e. more real estate. And I
Yep.
would pay it back. As soon as I get the next one refinanced, I'd pay that back. And guess what happens, by the way, is I keep adding income producing assets to my portfolio. What did that lender do for me on that line of credit? He increased it.
Kept increasing it.
Absolutely. So that's if I could can that process for everybody here and plant it in your brain, I'm telling you, I know it's conservative and I know it sounds slow, but I'm telling you to this day, the big recession when that hit, we didn't our business grew sixfold in that recession. Our income increased. I mean, it's because I was well positioned for it. I didn't plan for it. That was just pure dumb luck. I call it a Forrest Gump moment. You ever watch the movie Forrest Gump with the
Yep.
shrimp?
Yep. Yep.
That was me in real estate. I'm like, I just happened to be the guy that
Yeah.
had the right formula when the storm hit.
Yep, and I'm the one who was on the other side of that, who didn't do the things like Gary did
Okay.
and was very conservative, and we were very aggressive and had
Mhm.
a lot of debt on our properties, and we had adjustable rates on them, and all that stuff came to a head at one time and got very ugly. So, my goal would be to have you not do the way I did, do the way Gary did, be a little bit more conservative, have the capital to help make things happen, One thing I want to point out is Gary's not paying down that debt with all his own money. He has tenants in those properties, just in case you
Yep.
missed that part, paying down that debt. You guys listen to that part again because it's a little bit tricky, but if you listen to it enough times, it's going to make sense. Okay. So that it's really an important thing of what he said is how he built his portfolio in a fairly conservative way, but it went pretty fast and he
Mhm.
was able to walk away because that's what he chose to do. I don't want to do this anymore, but what if you could walk away, but you really love what you do and you want to stay there? That's even a better position to me because you
Yeah.
can I just know it feels better to know you don't have to do something, you
Yes.
know? Think about all that. I'm doing it because I want to.
Yeah. I
That's
agree
really good.
100%.
That's
Yeah.
really exciting. I just want people to really listen to that again because it
No.
was a lot, but it really will make sense to you if you really listen to it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So you talk about helping people leverage their businesses and their W-2 income, I'm assuming, and you correct me if I'm wrong, to get into real estate. How does that work? How can that
Well, there's two paths here. One is employees, and the other one are business owners. And I want to talk to the business owners for a second. I've worked with a lot of dentists over there. I don't know why. It's just some reason I attract dentists, but dentists tend to be very good business people. And I don't know if it's the association that helps them learn the skills of being a business person. Because remember, I know you know this, but I'm going to reemphasize it. Is when you own a business, you not only have to be the master of the skill, whatever product or service you offer, you also have to master the skills of being a business owner. You got to feel, think, speak, and act like a business owner. So
Mhm.
it turns out dentists, generally speaking, have done a good job of that. So when I work with them to start buying real estate, it almost always started with where they were, their practice. And I would say, look, instead of renting for someone else, let's buy something small. Maybe an old home that was converted to a little office house. We call them office houses. The
Uh-huh.
dentist office, orthodontist, excuse me, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Or even a small strip mall with say 4 units, right? You rent out the other three, and your practice is in the fourth one. And if you're really good, you'll rent the other three to other businesses that are complementary to your dental practice, right?
Yep,
Think
yep.
about that. Like, who's coming to visit this office? Hey, they might need to come see me too. So, and then when it came to real estate, this is really important too. You would have your practice in one type of legal entity. Now, I'm not an attorney, I'm not an accountant, but for the most part, they were S corps. From what I saw
Yeah.
from that is S corps. So I would have them set up another LLC to own the property, their property that they practiced out of, and other
Mhm,
properties.
mhm,
Separate
mhm.
LLC, separate tax things, separate everything. And one of the benefits is you can get business loans against both entities. You've got your
Mhm.
business, you've got the business of the S corp, you've got your properties and LLCs. Well, guess what? You can borrow against the S corp that houses your business practice, borrow money for that to buy the assets in these other LLCs, which are income producing assets. And if you structure it that way, the bank considers that a business because it is a business.
Mhm,
Business
mhm.
of renting properties to people who pay you rent, right?
Right.
But what's cool about that is that now you got the cash flow from your rental properties to pay down your business line of credit. So you can go out and redo and do that all over again. But here's what's really beautiful. I know some dentists, and I probably shouldn't mention names, but and both of them are actually in Arizona. And what they learned to do was they figured out, hey, they really still like you said, Felicia, they still love their business. They're naturally born to be dentists. And they buy other practices. So they grow their practice
Mhm.
and they can borrow against their properties, income producing assets in those LLCs to buy these other practices. So it gives you twice the leverage because now you got multiple LLCs, right? One's an S corp, one's a probably single member LLC. But that's how you can safely leverage what you already have to grow your investment income. Because eventually, guys, if there's any dentists listening, I know you're thinking, I'm 55, Gary. I don't want to be stuck behind the chair when I'm 60, past 65. Well, this is a way to make sure that doesn't happen. All right. Because your practice, believe it or not, it's going to be hard to sell. If you're a solo practitioner, you are your practice, right?
Yeah.
So the way to make it more saleable is to grow the practice, to have multiple offices. Then that becomes a very valuable, a very desirable business for someone to buy, right? So think long term. and think how you can leverage your existing practice by structuring it properly. And again, I'm not an attorney, but preferably an escrow that you get a business loan against to buy some other income producing properties, right? That you can use to also leverage against to buy more dental practices. Now you got these two entities working in tandem with each other to grow yourself quite quickly, by the way, a nice retirement,
So now I understand why I see so many dentists that are in houses. That made sense to me. Okay, their actual business is in a house.
Yeah.
And that exact same thing can work for physicians.
Yes.
We just don't learn that. We can buy our building that we're doing our practice in
Mm-hmm.
and then do the separate entities. That's a little detaily, but you always want an attorney helping you set these things up. And you want an accountant helping you make sure you understand the tax consequences of all the different things.
Yeah.
And by that building, you're going to work out of that building. If you buy a strip mall or buy a nice complex of buildings, you've
Mhm.
got one, rent the other ones out, just exactly what Gary said. So that is translatable into actual physical medicine, what the Western medicine model.
Mhm.
Dentists, I agree, seem to understand that a little bit. They just seem to be further along in the
Yeah.
business side of things than physicians are. I don't quite understand why, but all
Yeah.
the dentists I know seem to be way further ahead of the physicians on that.
Yeah. But there's no reason. My oldest brother-in-law is a surgeon. One of my first cousins is a surgeon, and I've just happened to be. I mean, I'm friends with some doctors, and it's true statistically. I think what it is, Felicia, is there's so much demand on their time that they just don't have the time. They in their minds, they don't have the time to do this. And it's okay to rely on other people, but I would really, boy, this is speaking from my heart, guys. Any of you who are physicians, and probably a lot of you are, it's good to delegate responsibility, but not delegate control. So maintain control over your finances and just delegate the responsibility. Like Felicia said, find the right attorney, the right accountant that's creative, but yet not too aggressive where you have audits every year. Nobody
Yeah.
likes an audit.
Right.
But the IRS code is written for us to use. And also, by the way, a really good realtor, not every realtor, by the way, most realtors, wonderful people, but they can help us buy and sell our own homes, and that's their skill and their talent. You really need to find what we call an investor agent. These are
Yep.
agents who usually investors themselves. And if they're certified, they're trained. In fact, ask them if they're a certified investor agent. That's really, really important. And then you have somebody who can go out and identify on and off market deals for you because you don't have to be all on the MLS services, on and off market deals. They know how to analyze them. And by the way, they probably have some ideas on creative purchasing techniques too. So you can do things like assume mortgages that people don't think we could do anymore. We absolutely
Yep.
can, you know?
Yep. The other thing I think that you talked about is there's a lot of debt happening, and a lot of us are really afraid of debt.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so that just the word starts making people have chest pain. And debt is not debt. In other words, all debt's not equal. Let me put it that way. So the debt that Gary's talking about and that I talk about and that all investment folks talk about is debt that's going to be paid by somebody else. So you're
Mhm.
going into debt so that you can have an asset, and an asset puts money in your pocket. It's not credit card debt it's all sucking out of you for your little doodad things that we all love.
Yeah.
A better way to do that, buy your asset, let your asset pay for your doodad thing, let it pay for your fancy car, let it pay for your gigantic range. If you're like me and like to cook
Yeah.
and you just want to fancy this, it's
Yeah.
it's beautiful to have something else paying for that, and you still have your asset after you've paid for your thing. So that's I think a lot of us physicians really, really don't like debt. And our whole goal after we get out of residency with our 6-figure student loan debt is to get rid of that and never be in debt again.
Yeah. I feel ya. I tell you, funny, when my kids were little, it was comical because if they wanted to go to Disney World, you know, I would say, well, we got to buy a house. And at least then they started getting like, when mommy wanted a new car, Daddy, we got to buy a new house. Mommy wants a car. So, you're right. So here's the thing. Remember this, you got assets and liabilities. Now, an asset is really only an asset if it feeds you, if it generates revenue, if it generates income. income producing asset. If
Yeah.
it's not, then it's a liability. So only borrow, only leverage debt to acquire income producing assets and let those acquire your doodads, like your fun things, vacations and
Yeah.
cars. I know
Yeah.
a house is a big thing. Everybody says, well, my house is my biggest asset. And I could see some of the logic there, but reality is if your house is not bringing in income. It's costing you gas,
Take,
lead, water, sewage, taxes, insurance, and
yeah.
it's liability.
One
You
thing
know?
you did talk about that to me that I was just going to say about your own personal residence potentially being an asset
Mm,
is when you've got equity in it and you can pull that equity then to then go buy income producing assets that are then going to pay that debt off for you
yes.
while your other stuff is happening. So that's how your house might be an asset. Otherwise, it's taking money from you every single day. Every day. There's no way.
Yes.
Anyway,
Mm.
Gary, that's a lot. We talked about a few things we want to talk about. I think we got through one of them, but that's really good. You talked about you buy these properties undervalued, and I know a lot of people that live in California, and they're probably listening. They go, there's no undervalued properties here in California. Nothing's going to cash flow. Nothing's going to do all the things that when you live in California, you don't feel like I could ever get enough rent to cover that thing.
Yeah.
One of my mentors says, live where you want to live, invest where the numbers make sense.
Yes. Yeah.
Talk about how you were able to I don't think you were in California, you're East Coast, I think?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Florida, just between the three. But I up until the pandemic, I would spend every other winter out in California, 4 to 6 months at a time. And we'll tell you right off the bat, guys, everything is relative. In California, absolutely, properties are more expensive as a whole, and rents are higher too, other than inside, like LA County and up in San Francisco, where they have rent control. Now the whole state, they may have already done it. They were trying to make that rent control. But remember, everything is relative. So there are plenty of investors in California. I mean, I've worked with dentists in California, right in Beverly Hills, and
Mhm.
West Beverly Hills is 82% rental, right? That means 82% of those properties are owned by landlords. So the way you buy properties in a scenario like that is one way is to put more cash down. You put more cash down, borrow less, so you cash flow. But one of the games that people play in California, of the investing in, is to invest for capital appreciation, not necessarily cash flow. And
Yeah,
I know people personally have bought properties with negative cash flow because they
yeah,
were so sure about the capital appreciation. Plus, you can structure debt creatively and things like that. But if nothing else, we have tools that we use that give us access to data for every single property in the entire country, residential, commercial, it doesn't matter. We can analyze every property. We analyze the owner situation. We know exactly who has what and who's most likely to be interested in selling. And we either get it for ourselves or we get it under contract to sell to somebody else.
mhm,
So obviously, everybody knows Texas is a great place to be, Georgia, Florida. Most of the Southeast is no matter how you slice it, the cost basis relative to cash flow is relatively low compared to like California or New York, right?
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
but in California, just look at the Central Valley. My gosh, Bakersfield all the way up to Modesto, and plenty of places you can buy still for cash flow, and they're still in
Yeah,
California. You can use short-term housing. You can do Airbnb. Go to buy a place in Laguna Beach. Yeah, you might spend $3 million on a four-bedroom, but you might make 4 million on Airbnb and the thing, on an annual basis. So there's different strategies like they call exit strategies that you can use for area. Let's face it, California is just beautiful. It's paradise. No wonder so many people want to be there and live there, and it's so expensive because of that. But at the same time, if you think about the market, and be thoughtful about where you are, ask yourself, what is the need? How are people? How can you make money? That's a famous question is how can I? And I'm telling you, Airbnb is one of the best things you can do out there. Yes, there are neighborhoods that won't let you do it, but you don't buy in those neighborhoods. So
there you go, and I'm gonna tell you, if you have a thing you have to do every day called a job, you're gotta get that done. You need a team. Even if you buy one Airbnb, you will probably pull your hair out with the stuff
mhm,
that's gotta happen with that. So make sure you know what you're doing and who can help you get it done. Bottom
yeah,
line. So everything is doable. It's always a how, not
mhm,
a what. Start asking yourself the question of how can I do that? How can I afford it? How can this make sense? your brain will figure it out for you if that's really what you want, or it'll tell you, no, that's not happening. And that
Yeah.
just means your box needs to be a little bit wider and you'll meet the person to help you do that. I promise. So just start asking a how question when you want to do something, and always just stay curious with that kind of mindset. That's really, really good. Okay, we were talking about certified investor agents.
Yeah.
So I think most of us don't know anything about that. And we would just go to a realtor. We decide we want to buy something and go to a regular realtor and tell us why that might not be the best thing to do when you want that certified investor agent.
Yeah, exactly. Just like if you need to see a cardiologist, you have a heart problem, you would specifically go to a cardiologist. You wouldn't
Yep.
go to a dermatologist, right? You'd go to a cardiologist.
Or a
So
urologist. You got to go to the
yeah,
cardiologist.
that's right. I could tell you all kinds of good jokes from the medical field. I probably shouldn't do that, but so we years ago, I got my license years ago, not because I wanted to be a realtor. I've never actually been a traditional realtor. I got it because I was frustrated because the agents typically were not trained to help me invest. Wonderful people, great to help me buy and sell my own home, but just were not educated in the world of investing. So I decided I'm going to just do it myself. So I did. And I just another lucky break. This guy, a local guy, invited me to be on his Saturday morning business radio program to talk about the investing I was doing. And he called me the next week and said, "Man, my phone was blowing up. I never had so many people want to have me train them on real estate investing because you're one of them. You're a regular guy in the city." And that led to me going to help them teach these investors. And they eventually found out I had my license. And they said,
Mhm.
"Man, just be my realtor." And I'm like, "Guys, I don't do that. I'm sorry." We're after about 1,000 times of God hit me over the head with a 4x4, I finally said yes. And when I did it under very specific protocol, I said, number one, I'm not an on demand 24/7. This is not what I do for a living. I'm doing this because I feel like it's a calling. So what I did is eventually built a brokerage around that premise, and we created a certification program as a result of that. So now agents around the country, really in Canada too, can come to the training. There's a team called the Global Investor Agent Team, and you can be certified you don't have to join a team to be certified, but most agents that do end up joining the team because the team's in 36 states, 3 Canadian provinces. And anybody if you know an agent out there, if you're a doctor or dentist and you have a neighbor who's an agent, you should tell them they need to look into this. Most of them won't because they think investors are crazy, because we do things differently. But the reality is it's just education and information. And when your friend, the agent, has the education, has information, and they're certified, we'll have no problem getting business from really good investors like you. And you'll have somebody on your team that has the tools to identify and analyze and negotiate on and off market properties. And sadly, Felicia, it's probably about 1% of the agent population. That's how
Yeah.
small that
Yeah.
niche is.
Yeah.
So, well, boy, they're rock stars in my book. So,
And there's a lot of business. So if you're a physician, you have whatever your position is out there, and you have a spouse or a partner who's at home and bored, does not, it's like, I really want to do something.
mhm,
I mean, there's some benefits to having a license as a realtor. And now we're talking about adding this little specialty part to it, being a registered investment agent.
mhm,
Your partner will help you invest. Your
mhm.
partner will help you write off a lot of taxes on your W-2. I'm not an accountant, but that is a thing. And everything just goes so much faster. So if you happen to be in that situation where you've got a partner or spouse that's bored at home, trying to figure out what they want to do with their life, just gently point them to this podcast and Gary Wilson, and you
Mhm.
never know what might happen there.
Yeah.
Gary, thank you so much. Tell us how people can get in touch with you. And somebody
Sure.
out there listening to this is going to direct their realtor to you or their spouse to you to help them get further along in what they want to do.
Sure. Well, a couple things for if anybody's interested. I actually did write a book last year called Global Investor Agent because I saw the market turning and I thought last time around, I was the guy in position to take advantage of it. And this time I'm thinking, I'm okay. I don't really I'm doing pretty good. I want to show others how to do it. So I wrote that book. They can get it on Amazon for your realtor friends. But if you go to globalinvestoragent.com, you can see the agents in all the different states and provinces and just pick them, call them up. If you do have an agent who wants to talk to me, there's a form they can fill out. In fact, you can do the same thing. the consumer. The other website is actually my name. It's realestatewithgarywilson.com. And we have books on there you can get for free. There's training. You don't have to pay for training. There's training you can get for low cost. There's higher level training. But what I like to do with people is say, look, I don't want you to spend a dime. I'd rather let you see for free what's available, what's possible, right? And then
Mhm.
this is something you want to pursue. Like check it
Mhm.
out first, get a free peek, especially want to pursue. That's how I do it. We don't have any hard sell programs. We don't have any big events where you come in and you walk away with a $50,000 cushion worth. Guys, that is not necessary. I'm telling you for a fact, I've done that. It is not necessary, you know? So, by the way, I think there's a form you can fill out there that says talk with me, something like
Uh-huh.
that, put in your name and number. And I'm kind of an open book. I mean, I don't mind sharing and it's served me well. I gain more from just taking that posture and just giving and then letting people see for themselves, let them come to the water on their own terms, you know?
Yep. Yep.
So,
Everybody that's doing something other than sitting down with their pad and pencil and pen and writing down what Gary just said, it will be in the show notes. So this is Gary Wilson. We will have everything he just said about how to get in touch with him in our show notes.
mhm,
And what I was smiling about part of the time was Gary was talking about how he thought, I don't want you to go necessarily go ahead and spend, you try it out before you actually get into it. We
right.
didn't get to do that in medicine, right? We had to spend the money to get to know whether we liked it or not. So there's other places in the world where you can get an education without having to spend six figures and go 6 figures in debt to learn what you need to know. You can even dip your toe in the water to try it out first. That's great. There's so much stuff going on in there. You guys, you're gonna have to listen to this more than once. You just get over yourself and listen to it again. Okay. Thank you, Gary, so much. I really, really appreciate it. There's so much information in this.
You're welcome, Felicia. Thank
Okay.
you too. Thank you, everyone listening. God bless you and your families and get in there and swing the bat. I'm telling you, do not wait. The opportunities are coming. And I promise you, you'll be grateful later that you took steps now to prepare for
Uh,
later, you know?
Yep. Yep. 100%.
Yeah.
Till next time. See you later.
You've been listening to Money with Mission. There are projects happening right now where you can have a great financial return while positively affecting the lives of others. To learn more about our opportunities, go to moneywithmission.com.